pleasure to be joined by Sheila, Brittany and Brion from Microsoft and Sunrise Technologies. We're going to be talking about the highs and lows of delivering a data-first shopping experience. This should be a really, really interesting presentation. I'm looking forward to listening to it. I'm going to make some notes. As always, I'm going to ask your questions at the end. And until then, look, let's hand over to Brittany. Let's get straight into it. Looking forward to this one. Brittany, it's over to you.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Coleman. I am with Sunrise Technologies. Sunrise is a Microsoft retail partner. We have been a partner with Microsoft for a long time now, I think since 2004. And I'm super excited to represent Sunrise today and on this really relevant topic about how to leverage data to deliver that exceptional customer experience. So thank you for having me. Sheila?
Perfect. Thank you, Brittany. Hi, I'm Sheila Bothwell, and I'm one of Microsoft's industry executives for our retail and consumer goods throughout the US. Really happy to be here. I've been working in the retail tech space for over 13 years at this point, and certainly the conversation of data, the conversation of transition continues on. And happy to have Brion with Microsoft as well. Brion?
Hey, Brion Reusche. I'm the Worldwide Strategy Director for a solution called Dynamics 365 for Commerce, which is our solution for engaging customers across any channel you might choose to do business with. So looking forward to having the conversation.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, Brion. So, I'm really looking forward to our dialogue and then questions from our audience at the end. But let's start with reimagining retail. So, Brion, Brittany, the three of us has worked together for a long time, and together we've worked with hundreds of retailers throughout the US and around the world. And I know that we can all agree on, one of many things, right? But as it relates to reimagining retail, when we really look at from 2 years ago to 20 years ago, it's been this continuous change and evolution with certainly no signs of slowing down, right?
Right.
So, Brittany, as you and I, along with Brion, we're of this generation that we have really watched digital shopping explode. Sometimes for me, it's hard to think back of my first experiences of buying clothes and how different it is today and now this current generation. So love to start the conversation with you sharing one of your first memories of shopping in your early days.
Yeah, so super happy to share this story. So one of my earliest memories had to be going with my friends and my mom. My mom actually just dropping us off at the mall and us just beelining it for Claire's. So for those of you who don't know, Claire's is this big retailer based in the US. I'm not sure if they have offices globally or not, but definitely in the US, kind of focused on that sort of preteen girl, early teenage girl, specifically looking at jewelry and accessories. And so we would just hit them all, head to Claire's, and this was before store associates had, laptops, before we could access the internet on our phones. As a matter of fact, I think it cost like $1 a minute to access data, and I actually had the pleasure of having a Sony Ericsson. That was my very first cell phone from Singular when that was still around. So I wasn't doing any shopping on that. And it was just, the experience was just me and my friends. We were picking out jewelry. We had virtually no interaction with the store associate that I remember. It could have been because they knew between the three of us, we only had like $30. I don't know. But, really it was just upon checkout that I had, the typical interaction with the store associate. And then maybe if one of us was getting our ears pierced again that day, we might be able to do that at Claire's. But, from a store associate standpoint, it was pretty straightforward what you expect, buying your items and then checking out.
Yeah, I love it. I can certainly share that story as well. So more recently, though, I was just at Claire's with my daughter, and she was convinced she was going to get her ears pierced. She didn't, but I got my ear pierced again. So, 30 years later, I was at Claire's with my mom getting my ears pierced, and I think that's just a great company, a great example, though, that it's really fun to think about how Claire's, specifically, their foundation it's remained consistent, right? 30 years later, that is part of their brand. It's part of what they do, but they've digitally shifted. They've had to evolve along the way as well, and they've incorporated new concepts. Right. So to kind of talk about present time now, Brittany, what's your shopping experience like now? How have you shifted as a consumer yourself?
Right. So, before COVID, and I think it's important to kind of highlight before COVID because that's certainly a little bit different now. But I definitely remember retail experiences being very constructed in a way that they were not for me when I was growing up. So, in the example I just shared, it was really just me hanging out with my friends. Like the experience was with my friends. We were away from our parents. We were looking at boys, picking on jewelry, trying on prom dresses like 5 years too early. Like that's what our experience was. But, as I grew up and of course, leading into COVID, I felt like the experience was more constructed. So I would come into the store and it would be curated around like a pop-up shop, right? Or some kind of fashion show experience that the retailer thought I would be interested in and that would delight me in some way. And I think that, unfortunately, although with COVID, a lot of those in-person experiences kind of came to just screeching halt, unfortunately, my expectation as a consumer and wanting a personalized, delightful experience, that did not go away. In fact, it really just shifted online. And so nowadays, pretty much all of my shopping starts on my phone. I am happy to say I no longer have my Sony Ericsson. It retired a long time ago. I'm using my iPhone, although sometimes I definitely do miss the simplicity of that little thing. But yeah, so I'm doing a lot of research up front. I am, maybe reading articles depending on what I'm buying. I may be looking at photos. I'm on social media, watching videos, engaging with content that way. So definitely a lot of content binging on this end. But ultimately, whether I choose to make a purchase online or in store, I expect that the brands and retailers are delivering a personalized, heightened experience. And that is something that I am going to continue to expect going forward. And I think a lot of people are going to expect that as well.
Totally. Brion, love to hear from you next. What is your transformation and your evolution as a consumer?
Well,
Are you shopping at Claire's, Brion?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I can't necessarily relate with the Claire's ear piercing experience, but what I can relate to is I was actually raised by a single mother, and she was an ASM at a JCPenney in Westminster, Colorado. And you can imagine that me as an elementary school kid, I spent a lot of my time like in the break room around JCPenney associates as a mall rat running around Westminster Mall. And speaking, Brittany, what you were just talking about really brought me back, and it made me think about all those conversations that all those associates had back in the 80s. And customer wasn't part of them, right? It was like merch, gossip, a little bit of snark around some customer experience, but certainly not how do I deliver that exciting experience. So, my expectations at the same time are exactly what yours are, Brittany, and I think that's the new normal, especially now that COVID happened and we've got so much digital engagement.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's a great transition because I'm excited to point this one at Sheila now. So Sheila, you have been with Microsoft, in retail for the last 13 years, with Microsoft for 6. And Microsoft is obviously blazing a trail with the new retail cloud and all the things that they're doing just to enhance the retail experience with, partners like Sunrise. And so keeping in mind sort of the journey we've all just been talking about, all of us had these unique experiences and all have these expectations going forward. Can you talk to me a little bit about how Microsoft really is thinking about experiential retail?
Sure. Yeah, love to. It's definitely a favorite topic. And I'm sure what I'm about to share is no surprise to most people. We at Microsoft, we continue to focus on retail and consumer goods with data as the center. So we know that more data is being presented to companies and retailers at a higher level each day, and it's introducing more disparity. And so when we can really help a retailer tap into that and help them deliver that personalized customer experience across all these different channels, we're really thrilled. And exceeding that consumer experience, that end consumer, that's really our mission. So when a retailer can map out the consumer journey, they can predict what is coming down to that individual level, we know that they're going to be winning. So, an example, right? For me personally, right? Time's limited, as it is for most people these days. Work, family, running the household. I really expect to have a superb experience when I'm shopping. And so I love it when a company knows about my data. They know what I've purchased. They know my preferred size. They know what product to recommend to me, because this allows me to be more efficient, right? And that's what the consumers are searching for here today. So capturing my data and offering it to their marketing teams, their e-commerce teams, and their store associates, is a great balance of what I'm looking for. And I think all consumers are, right? Especially as we're going back to stores now. So, when I went to the mall the other day and that particular retailer had all my online purchases over the last 18 months, it was awesome because it really helps me do my shopping job a lot easier. And I want to be more loyal, right? And that's what I think we're all talking about, from, the 80s to the 90s to where we are today. And now post-COVID, that is going to be essential for brands, essential for retail. Yeah. So, but with that, it's not only about the consumer. It's not only about me. It's about the store associates, right? And this is where Brion touched on it with his experience growing up. How can we give them empowerment, and how can we make them the best brand ambassador for their own stores? That's what Microsoft's mission is. And equally as important, right? Having a compliant, trusted, secure solution platform as well. That's going to be the lifeline of success for retailers long term. So there's the short term and the long term vision. So, Brion, I know you well. I know you're on your edge of your seat here. You want to talk about the store associates. It's a great passion of yours, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts about as it relates to really embracing the store associates now, today, and in the future.
Yeah, great question. I mean, one of the things that's obviously top of mind for a lot of retailers right now is kind of just in general a labor shortage. And, there's a lot of pressure around keeping those associates around and engaged. And when I think about, associates today, certainly I think there's been a generational shift. And we're thinking about things not in terms of, oh, yeah, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to get, $15 an hour or whatever I'm going to get. But like, they have expectations. They have, expectations about self-actualization, right? And I want to be an influencer. Not only do I want to work in a store, but I want to build my own personal brand along that same journey. So, how we enable associates and how we make their jobs, first off, easy from a technology perspective, but also giving them that platform to make staying around valuable is super, super important, because fulfillment is top of mind, particularly when they have the option of dropping you and going somewhere else, kind of at the drop of a hat. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, in thinking about that, the store associates, whether that's arming them or whether that's using the data in some other way from some third party, as I was sort of mentioning, with my experience before and how I shop on Instagram or however it is, altogether, I think there's probably still some limitations that we want to think about. And so I think we've all probably experienced situations where maybe the retailer or the brand knows a little bit too much about us, or, we started shopping for this thing and all of a sudden, like, these ads are following us everywhere. And it's just like, oh, I just wanted, maybe I wanted to keep that secret. Maybe I didn't want that on my face or not. And so I think in kind of this cookieless future, and the way that access to data is changing, it kind of puts a lot of onus on brands and retailers to think differently about how they're going to engage with their customer going forward.
Totally. You said it well. There's the balance. So how much and at what time is going to continue to be the conversation? And it's going to be, it's going to vary between the company and who their consumer is in some cases too. But we do feel strongly that companies need to maximize the value of that first party data still, whether that is the data collected from their own domains about their own customers, but also that information from the backend systems, right? So this far into the conversation, the three of us has talked a lot more about our front applications and the in-store. But there is that major source of data that brands and retailers have from their backend operations. And this is where an area that is really where we're seeing those customers move, the retailers, move to that elite level. It's really when they're starting to leverage that data for that exceptional back office operations. And Brittany, I know Sunrise does this well. So love to hear from you, a couple of little nuggets that you've seen along the way with some retailers.
Yes. So I'm super, super excited to get to this slide. I've been waiting to get to this slide. So because it means I get to talk about Patagonia, which is a long time customer of Sunrise and Microsoft. And when you think about Patagonia, this is a brand and also a retailer with a just robust presence. I mean, their relationship with their customers, I can't think of anyone that's just got such a tighter relationship from a brand equity standpoint. They do so much for not only the environment and advocacy, but they just got a great presence. And so with all of that, they are someone who decided, okay, I'm going to take it to the next level, right? I'm going to figure out how to leverage my data across my enterprise to just even take it a step further and deliver that exceptional customer experience. So I think to illustrate this example, story really works best. And so recently I heard of a woman, we'll call her Jane, called into the Patagonia customer service center, right? And she was wanting to find a jacket for her son who had become extremely attached to it. So similar to Linus that you see here, I don't know how many people are familiar with Peanuts from growing up, but just, you can still see visually, he's super attached to that blanket. Her son was super attached to this Patagonia jacket. And of course, as time goes on, kids grow, they grow out of things, but he still just really wanted to have this jacket. And so she calls in frantically to the Patagonia customer service center and is trying to find this jacket. She tried probably going in store, looking for it herself. She couldn't. And luckily, this customer service representative was able to locate the exact jacket that she wanted in the size she needed for her son. It was in their Seattle store, I think. And so they were able to ship it from the Seattle store right to that woman's door. And, it was happy day. Her son got the jacket. And now and forever, there's probably nothing you can tell that woman bad about Patagonia to convince her that, it's just not her number one retailer, I don't think, because she was in that moment able to create delight with her son, which, as a mom, that's their jobs, right? That's what you want to do for your kids. And so, I think it's important, as we've been talking about, creating experiences, whether it's with the in-store associates or it's online, you don't want to underestimate the experience of giving the consumer what they want, right? Because at the end of the day, retailers, that's what you're in business to do. You have products that you provide. You want to get them in the hands of your customers, and then happy day. And so one of the things that we like to say at Sunrise is that, yes, brands compete, but also their supply chains compete. So who's getting that product in the hand of the customer faster? Who's going to have that competitive advantage and be able to be constantly reinforcing that relationship with their customer as, I'm a reliable retailer, come to me, you're going to get what you need. And that's essentially what happens when you have connected data in this way. So in another scenario, maybe Patagonia's data didn't flow freely between their retail system and their backend system, or maybe the customer service agent didn't have access to it. She couldn't see where it was. So all of these types of things end up being enabled by having this free flow of data exchanged across your enterprise. And so that, that's an example that I love to share. It shows the value of just, connected data. And it's just such a nice story, right? You love to be able to give people what they want.
Absolutely. And Jane, as a mother, you always want to give your child what they want. So that instant gratification that Patagonia was able to deliver made her day, right? As well as her child. So absolutely love it, Brittany. Kind of round out the session here is we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about the customer map, the customer journey. We've talked about data. Brion shared, a lot of great intel and insights from our point of view for the store associates. So we together and our companies and our experience, we've gone through this evolution with a lot of companies. But I think the question that I always have, or we always hear, is where do we start? Where do we get started? How do we work together to really build out our future retail experience? And Brion, this is where you've been a major asset to Microsoft as a thought leader and spent a lot of time with customers around the world on this. So I'd love to hear from you of what you would recommend.
Yeah, maybe this sounds too utilitarian for a Microsoft employee, but at the end of the day, in my opinion, technology is technology. Like, it is what it is. You're gonna get what you put into it. But perhaps the biggest challenge that I see most of our joint customers going through is just getting that organizational alignment. If you put up a top level strategic priority for your organization, it trickles down to the various silos of the organization, and then everybody ends up with competing priorities about what that technology footprint that's going to solve for their department's problem really is. So that's what ends up getting you in situations where you have disjointed systems and integrations and no source of truth, to Brittany's point about inventory or orders or stores or anything. So, from my perspective, getting that organizational alignment, getting literally both the business decision makers and the technical decision makers in the room at the same time to hash out what the priorities is probably the most important step. And, one of the things that I think has been very impactful is, as Microsoft, we've kind of stopped looking at it from, purely a product perspective, and we really started looking at it from a human-centered design perspective. So, I'm not trying to make a pitch or anything, but as an example, you can have a design thinking workshop. You can get all these business decision makers in the room. You can say, okay, what is our North Star organizationally, and then how does it impact the associates? How does it impact the customers? And what should that ideal journey for both of those look like? And at the end of that, kind of day, a few hours, whatever it is, workshop, whatever your organization can afford, you end up with a pretty good picture of where is value, where is priority, and how do we get there? And that leads to kind of a what we call a multi-horizon approach, where you can say horizon 1 are the quick wins that are going to drive value. Horizon 3 are those North Stars that are going to strategically change our organization. And here's a roadmap to get there. And it really does take that level of commitment from the organization to get in the room together to even get to what the first step should be.
Beautiful. Thank you, Brion.
Yep. So I think with that, that kind of wraps up our prepared comments, but we're happy to move to the Q&A session now.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, really, really interesting stuff there. So thank you for the presentation. I love the Patagonia story as well. Obviously, that really speaks to a very integrated approach. It's interesting that the person called in, and I wonder if there are mechanisms to digitally call in a way. Do you know what I mean? If that person didn't make the telephone call, is there potentially proactive ways that we could enable that telephone call to be made? Because not everyone has the gusto to telephone their favorite retailer. But I'm sure that there are. Maybe just not me. But I get it. I mean, I was just wondering if you could share maybe any other examples like that, because it was such a perfect snapshot of how you could integrate your digital technologies from your departments to enable that consumer experience.
So I can share, an example from the back end about how Sunrise is working with other apparel companies just to think about ways to get their inventory in the hands of the customer as quickly as possible. So it's sort of an indirect example. And so we've been working a lot with customers around invoicing and sort of streamlining that process. If you're an apparel company, or really any company, you're probably getting invoices from many different spaces. So it could be your freight forwarder, it could be a merchandise vendor, it could be the government, right? Customs sending you an invoice, and all of those people want to get paid right before they give you your inventory. And as thinking again of this topic of data and getting data into a place where you can actually do something with it. Like a lot of times data has to be entered into a system, right? And so, with that comes a little bit of risk, human error. And so what we've been doing is working with a solution called Power Automate and optical character recognition to really streamline, some of that data entry and make it faster to just get these invoices processed so that ultimately, like, your payment's not hung up in AP, your vendor's not mad at you, they're not holding your inventory. And, there might be agreements you have with a civic vendor, certain terms, right, that for when you need to pay. But regardless, I think most vendors would like to get paid eventually before they give you the goods. And so, less shiny example, I'd say, than the Patagonia one. But ultimately, just in thinking about that flow of both, your goods and your data and getting it to the customer, to my point earlier, delivering that experience, that is something that we're thinking a lot about, and how to just streamline some of that, just data entry. Because thinking about topic of the day, highs and lows, I think one of the lows is probably data entry for some people, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you're not wrong, and not everything has to be super shiny to be super valuable,
Yeah.
So thanks for that example. Brion, did you have something also to add on that? I saw that at the beginning, maybe you were going to add something on that particular topic.
I would just say profitability is about balance,
Yep.
Particularly when you're talking about a retail organization, and, making sure that your vendors are paid, make sure that the inventory is there, the inventory being there, make sure that, the customer is getting that jacket that the kid wants.
Yeah.
And, from a profitability perspective, that woman would have paid whatever money she needed to get that jacket, and being able to fulfill that across the entire organization. It's a holistic view that I think is necessary to drive profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. A sort of company ethos. Brion, there's a question directly to you from the audience. I just want to ask this. What future possibilities do you see for store associates to interact with online shoppers and make that experience personalized? So future possibilities for personalized experience interaction.
Yeah, it's so interesting working at Microsoft, because we are just constantly running into partners like Sunrise or others that are in our ecosystem who are building value-added technologies, things that, Microsoft architects have never even really thought of. And that innovation, whether it's coming from Microsoft directly or it's coming through our partners, is what drives organizations towards change. So, how do you make your associates more interactive with your customers, right? Live streaming is a great example. I don't think it's hitting the US shores quite as heavily yet, as it is, over in China and Japan and some of the other Asiatic countries. But, you're seeing Nordstrom start doing this. And again, getting back to that idea of self-actualization, those are interesting conversations for an associate, right? And associates, while they love restocking shelves, they like, solving customer issues. I think that when we start putting, solutions like, teams to enable associates that are particularly versed in particular categories of goods to step away from that kind of day-to-day duty and really interact with a customer that's online, that's interesting. And that's how I think you kind of change monotony and you drive associate engagement in a way that's, compelling.
Thanks for that. Guys, I'm going to ask a couple more. I know that we've run out of time, but I hope the audience will bear with us because there's a few more questions from the audience. So let's get through them, right? Sheila, I'm going to come to you with this one. It's about bias. And the question is, and it's from the audience, how does Microsoft Cloud make sure that bias does not come into the virtual retail experience? Experiences based on customer income or location. So how do you make sure that bias doesn't come into the equation based on income or location? This is from the audience. So excuse me for the sort of random nature of the question. I'm just trying to reread it again to see if I can make more sense of it.
Yeah, Brion, can you dissect that for me a bit? What do you think the question is?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, the question is probably really about ethical AI and about, making sure that data sovereignty and All the data restrictions are adhered to by Microsoft's cloud. And, at the highest levels, what I would just generally say is that, when you're betting on Microsoft, you're betting on us being available across the globe, being able to solve for all of the various data sovereignty issues and laws and regulations that might be occurring. So, certainly the tools that you're provided are going to live within the restrictions that both Microsoft's ethical AI policies as well as our data governance and sovereignty policies afford one. So that's what my guess is it's kind of like, how do we create the boundaries that allow you to operate without bias and without overstepping into gray areas?
Thank you. Yeah, and to add to that, if I may, so thank you, Brian, for helping me with that. As we look at the Microsoft Cloud for Retail, since that was mentioned in the question, I think it's important to bring up, this is not something new. This is not a new solution. We've been engineering this for years. And these are products that sit on our platform, as Brian described, that follow all of our guidance and regulation, and really where our highest standing mission is to have a secure, compliant platform. So it's important to know that while it's a new term potentially that's out there, it's sitting on our secure solution platform in this dataverse that we've had for many, many years today.